I'm Will.
And I'm Mike.
And this is Vandal Tough Talk.
Remember, this podcast is sponsored by Vandal Athletic Gear. All right, so we're back again with the recap for Fedor versus Bader 2. And then a shocking upset again. Well, this one wasn't so much an upset as the first one. But, we thought, a lot of people thought Fedor had a chance of winning. But Ryan Bader thought not.
Yeah, I don't think this really was much of an upset. Ryan Bader right now held 2 belts. People, I think, was hoping, myself, I was hoping that Fedor could just land one shot on him. But you could see during that fight that he was just, his time and his speed and everything was just off. And it's nothing bad. That says nothing less of the man, because he killed giants. I mean, literally took down giants of MMA.
Right.
And I mean, he owned the 2000s. From 2000 to 2009, 2010, he owned the heavyweight division.
Right.
In whatever organization he was in. So I can't really say it's an upset. I think people are mad because they didn't want to see him go out like that. But Bader is legit. I mean, he was legit when he left the UFC. Bader was a top 4, top 5 light heavyweight when he left the UFC. He just chose to go elsewhere.
Right. And that could have simply been for how hard it was to crack that top 5. When you got down to the top of the top, and everybody is like on God level. When he was in the UFC, that's when the light heavyweight division
was at its best.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was the best division at that time, with Daniel Cormier, Ryan Bader, Glover Teixeira, John Jones. You had guys in that division that could fight, and it was Rashad Evans.
Yep.
You had guys in that division was just,
it was
they
loaded.
could fight. And Anthony Rumble Johnson.
It was loaded, right?
Rest in peace, Anthony Rumble Johnson. So you had guys that could really just throw down when Bader was in that division. Bader cut the 205 is the reason. I think Bader lost many of his fights because the cut. Bader's a big guy. Last night watching him in the ring with Bader was a small guy. If you watch at the end of those fights, he's standing there, Chuck Liddell and Dan Henderson and all these guys. He's really, Rampage made him look small. I mean, the guy wasn't a big guy. He just had power. He had that Russian power. And he had speed and agility in his Pride days that was unmatched. Guys couldn't. He put a pace on them that they couldn't live up to.
Right. He basically did the same thing Randy Couture did.
Yes, he put that pace on them.
And that's what Daniel Cormier did as well.
Mm-hmm.
They used the fact that they could wrestle and roll with these big guys to their advantage, and that they could just press them into submission. They would all get gassed.
The guy's just been fighting that long. He's kept an impeccable record for being 46 years old, still in MMA.
Right.
And guys just don't remember that. I mean, when Jose Aldo was coming up, he was fighting in WEC. Fedor was owning the Pride scene. He was owning the heavyweight division.
But if we go back in history, this is generally how fighters go out.
Yes, yeah.
It was painful to watch Anderson Silva go through what he went through. It was painful to watch Chuck Liddell go through what he went through. Painful to watch BJ Penn getting boxed up till he was 41. And BJ was done at like 37, 38. And it was like, man, he went for so long.
Yeah.
And then it was to a point where the UFC just didn't even pick him up.
Yeah, and it was, and look at BJ Penn when he was on top of his game. He was the elite of elite. I mean, the guy could go from light. He's the only guy I've ever seen go from lightweight or light heavyweight, or not even light heavyweight, welterweight to 155, all the way up to heavyweight, to where he fought Machida over in Japan. So, you have to remember, like, some of these guys, and they talking about Lesnar and Cain Velasquez, and these guys have been around before them. And they're still around because if you're honest with yourself, Kane and Brock Lesnar are done. This is just legendary of the people he beat. Babaru Sabarov.
Whoa!
Sammy Shield. Heath Herring. Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira. Ironhead Fujita, Big Daddy Gary Goodrich, Mark the Hammer Colby, Kevin Randall, Mikro Filbo Krokop, Mark Hunt, Matt Lindman, Tim Sylvia. These are UFC champions that held the belt maybe a year prior to Fedor beating them.
Yeah, they wasn't on any type of decline.
No, they were at the top of their game. They were the best. Tim Sylvia held that belt for at least 9 or 10 years. Tim Sylvia, Andre Arlovsky, Jeff Munson, Pedro Hizzo, Frank Mir, Chael Sonnen, Quentin Jackson, and Tim Johnson. That list alone would give most guys 5, 6, 7 losses. And so, I mean, you got to keep it all in perspective when you're talking about it. And, you know, a fight game, anything can happen.
Right.
But this guy went through the best of the best at that time.
Yeah, and you know, it's easy for you know, people on the sidelines saying, you know, why would you keep going? Why would you keep going? But you know, a lot of these guys work their whole life for this thing, and to walk away from it, just like with any other sport, it's hard for them to walk away from it. You know, like nobody wanted to see Michael Jordan come back for the Wizards, but everybody was grateful when he did come back for the Wizards. You know, I don't know nobody that said, I hated that Michael Jordan came back, just seeing him on the TV, period. You enjoyed watching him. You just didn't like that it wasn't the old Mike.
And I think people that think like that are the reason why they aren't those people.
Right.
There's a reason why Fedor Emelianenko is who he is. There's a reason why Tom Brady is who he is. There's a reason why Michael Jordan is who he is. People say, well, Tom should have retired because his family and this. If he was made up like that, you would never be talking about Tom Brady in 7 Super Bowl. If Fedor didn't think he still had it, which he probably didn't from us looking at it, but inside
but,
him,
you know,
he's
when
a
you
warrior.
think, and you know your body, and you're preparing for these things, and your body's feeling the way you want it to feel. You know, he's checking all these boxes before he go in there. He ain't just no crash dummy. Think he gonna go in and be the heavyweight champion. He ain't got it. He just want to give it a shot. That ain't what these guys do. They worry about their life.
Exactly. Those guys are not. He's not fighting Ryan Bader thinking, okay, I'm gonna just go out there. I know this guy gonna beat me. He thinks he can win.
And who tell you can't win when you got all of the achievements that say you can win?
Exactly. The guy beat he beat who's who of MMA. And most of the guys were always bigger than him. Very few of them that wasn't bigger than Fedor. And Dan Henderson coming to mind being one. And
he was one of the ones that was actually smaller.
But everybody knows if Dan Henderson hit you with that right hand, he could knock a heavyweight out. And you know, they look at his losses and they say Verdum and they say Dan Henderson. If you ever look at the fight, which I know most people don't, they look at the name and they say, well, he lost to Verdum, he lost to Dan Henderson. Both of those guys, he was smoking. He put it on them. He just overcommitted on both of them. He put it on Verdum, dropped him. But nobody jumps in Verdum's guard. Nobody. And he jumped in the guard twice. Got out the first time, and the second time made the same mistake, and Verdum locked him up for the submission.
The chapter pretty much closes on the last emperor. Who do you think is gonna be Bader's next? He's a champion, right?
Yeah, he's a heavyweight champion.
I don't know much about
Bellator.
Yeah. Who do you think is gonna be his next fight?
I would say the guy Fedor's bringing up, but Bader just beat him. So I'm not sure in the heavyweight division of Bellator. You have to watch because there's a lot of young Russian fighters coming up, and they're heavyweights. And you still have Chet Congo.
And you got a chance.
Still
wow, he's over there.
Yeah, he's still out there. So.
And you got a chance that any of the UFC heavyweights could up and quit.
Well, Francis
Ngannou, shot. Right.
Francis Ngannou just left the UFC. Who's to say he don't come over to Bellator and become the heavyweight champ?
Bader versus Ngannou 1. That'll be a fight. That'll be a heck of a fight. I don't think they ever matched up.
Ngannou wasn't even in the UFC at that point. But what I want to see then is what will people say? That Ngannou was on the way down too, and he was on the way out. The guy was the heavyweight champion. So what excuses will people use when he goes over, and if he beats Bader or Bader beats him?
Well, the only thing I think about this one is, Gano's clearly in his prime. And he left the UFC. It wasn't like he wasn't a draw anymore. He wasn't, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
A lot of those guys jump ship when they're not a draw anymore.
But that wasn't for Bader, though. Bader was a draw. He was
Right.
a top 4, top 5, 205. They didn't give him the contract and the fights that he wanted. He wanted to fight Daniel Cormier. They skipped him over for a couple of fights, and Bader decided to leave. So it ain't like Bader was on his way down and he went over to Bellator and now he's rejuvenated and he's found the youth. Bader was a top 5 fighter in the UFC.
All right, so to wrap it up, we're gonna turn it over to you, Squad. Who do you think will be the next opponent for Ryan Bader? Remember, this podcast is sponsored by Vandal Athletic Gear. Vandal Bros out.